As the movie begins, we are introduced to Dominika Egorova, a lead ballerina for the Bolshoi Company in Russia. The privileged company takes care of her and her mother by offering benefits such as living arrangements and medical insurance for her ailing mother. One evening, Dominika leaves her mother in the hands of her caretaker, Lenny, and heads to work. Upon reaching there, she hastily prepares for her performance before welcoming the guests, including her uncle, Ivan Egorova. It turns out that Ivan is the deputy director of the Russian intelligence service, better known as the SVR. He praises Dominika and presents her to Dmitry Ustinov, a Russian gangster. Then, after requesting a photo with Dominika, he touches her inappropriately on her bare back. After the show begins, Dominika captivates the audience with her graceful and mesmerizing performance. However, the performance is cut short when the lead male ballet dancer leaps off the dance floor and lands on her leg. Dominika is subsequently taken to the hospital, where she undergoes emergency surgery. After a few hours, the poor girl awakens to discover that she will never be able to dance again due to her severe injuries. Now, Dominika breaks down in tears as she loses her career prestige and position in a matter of seconds. We are then introduced to Nate Nash, who is a CIA agent working in Russia. He is seen waiting for a phone call, which turns out to be a cipher. He promptly deciphers the coded audio and draws his gun from underneath his desk before leaving to meet with a Russian intelligence mole codenamed Marble. During the evening, the two arrive at their rendezvous and approach one another from opposite directions. Marble cautiously hands Nate something as the two cross paths, then walks away. Just then, a police car pulls up, and Nate erratically fires a gun in an attempt to create a distraction and help his contact, Marble, make an untraceable escape. However, it is eventually revealed that the police were only vice officers and did not pose a threat to Marble, and as a result of his impulsive actions, he is compelled to go back to the United States. Meanwhile, Dominika returns to her apartment one day to find her uncle, Ivan, waiting for her. Ivan warns her that the Bolshoi will soon kick her out of the apartment and will no longer cover her mother's medical expenses since she can no longer dance and work for them. He then offers to help Dominika and encourages her to visit him whenever she is ready. Then right before he leaves, Ivan states that the accident that led to her injury was not an accident. Instead, the lead dancer did it on purpose. Ivan then backs up his claim with several pictures of the dancer and his girlfriend, who has taken Dominika's place as the lead dancer. In addition, he plays a tape conversation between the two, which reveals that the male dancer deliberately hurt Dominika's legs so that his girlfriend could take on the lead position. Outraged, Dominika goes to the theater to confront the couple and discovers them making love in the restroom. She then mercilessly beats them and knocks them unconscious with her walking stick without hesitation. Later, when Dominika returns home, she finds her mother lying on the floor, and in a very frail state at this point, she finds herself in a desperate situation with no choice but to seek Ivan's help. The next day, Dominika comes to Ivan for help as she faces a bleak and uncertain future. Ivan is assigned to the task of seducing Dmitry Ustinov and then covertly switching his phone so they can spy on him. Although she initially refuses the position, Ivan persuades her by claiming that he can help her and her mother with the apartment and medical expenses. Thus, Dominika agrees to do the task for the sake of her mother. Later that night, Dominika goes to the hotel where Dmitry is supposed to check in and meets him at the bar. Once the gangster arrives, the two, after a brief conversation, enter a private room. Dmitry commands Dominika to take off her clothes before brutally assaulting her. However, they are interrupted when an SVR agent authorized by Ivan shows up and strangles Dmitry to death. Dominika then lies there, horrified, as the gangster's blood drips on her before the agent takes her away. Afterward, Ivan approaches and upsets Dominika and claims that he didn't warn her, though he was aware of what would happen in that room, because she wouldn't have agreed if he had. He then callously presents her with a choice: join the Russian intelligence service, or be executed for having witnessed Dmitry's assassination. Dominika knows she has no options at this point, so she accepts his offer to work as an SVR agent. Following this, Dominika is transferred to Stake School 4 to start her Red Sparrow training. This is the institution that specializes in grooming young people to murder through seduction and psychological manipulation. During the class, Dominika and another man named Victor are asked to strip in front of the entire class. While Victor complies with the orders, Dominika hesitates, for which the matron chastises her. Meanwhile, Nate returns to Washington for his debriefing and is barred from accepting any further overseas projects. Following that, Nate claims that he has been working with Marble for 3 years and that his contact won't speak to anyone else, given that Marble refuses to cooperate with any other CIA agents. They send Nate to Budapest to regain contact with him and persuade him to communicate with a different agent. On the other hand, Dominika continues her training by acquiring skills to use and track various chemicals, shoots, and picklocks. One day, Matron asserts that every individual is like a puzzle with a piece missing, so Red Sparrow has to understand the other person's true need before fulfilling it. She then instructs the students to entice the soldiers presented before them, and Dominica chooses a quiet boy for the task. Afterward, a fellow Sparrow walks in and attempts to assault her as she is taking a shower. However, she immediately rips the shower handle off and relentlessly beats him with it. Meanwhile, Ivan meets with his superiors, General Kortnoy and Colonel Zakharov, to discuss Nate's transfer to Budapest and how they intend to track down Marble through him. As a result, they decide to fly someone to Budapest on a mission to win Nate's trust and disclose Marble's identity. Despite Dominica's inability to abide by the matron's orders, Ivan and General Kortnoy decide that Dominica will carry out this mission in Budapest. Days later, Dominica flies into Budapest, where she lives with Marta, another Sparrow. Then she starts visiting the same pool that Nate frequently goes to. Despite Nate's initial attraction to her, Dominica plays hard to get and even fabricates a lie about working as a translator for an embassy. But one day, she doesn't see him at the pool, and the receptionist informs her that her ID is missing. Nate seems to have uncovered her true identity. So he informs his superiors that Dominica has been going by several names and that she is connected to Ivan. Despite the initial skepticism of his superiors, Nate eventually wins them over by arguing that she is valuable and that he can use her friendship to gain information. Later, Dominica inspects Marta's room and learns that Stephanie Butcher, the chief of staff to the U.S. government, has assigned her the task of buying confidential intelligence. Meanwhile, Nate invites her for dinner, but instead of going, she waits outside for him to leave. She then follows him inside his apartment, pretending to cry. Now, Dominica starts kissing Nate, but he takes control of the situation and asks that she go back home. The following day, Ivan meets Dominica to inquire about her progress with Nate. Dominica then explains to him that she is getting to know Nate more and better as they become friends. In addition to this, she lies to him to buy herself some time, claiming that she is also collaborating with Marta on her Stephanie Guterres. Later, Dominica arrives back at her apartment to find Marta executed for revealing the specifics of her assignment. She is then warned that if she doesn't provide results, she will face the same consequence. Thereafter, Dominica pays Nate a visit at his house when he confesses to knowing her real identity. She also reveals her side of the story, emphasizing the fact that she had to become a spy solely out of concern for her mother's safety. Hearing this, Nate offers her to join his team as a double agent, vowing to protect her and never to treat her the way her uncle does. Dominica agrees to this, and in the heat of the moment, the two make love to each other. The next day, the CIA conducts a lie detector test on Dominica, and she passes it. Once they accept her, she proceeds to demand payment. They initially laugh at her, but change their minds when Dominica informs them she can offer them Stephanie Butcher, who is sending the information to Russia. After this, Dominica travels to London with her boss to meet with Butcher and finalize her transaction. As per Russian demands, Butcher sells the information for $250,000, but Dominica secretly exchanges it as she leaves the hotel. Butcher becomes aware that she is being observed by U.S. intelligence officers. She then panics and gets killed in traffic by a pickup truck. Meanwhile, the Russian agents watching Butcher suspect Dominica of notifying the Americans as their mission has been jeopardized. As a result, she is summoned to Moscow on short notice. But by the time Nate discovers Dominica is in trouble, it is too late to help her. Dominica is then tortured for several days and interrogated about whether she provided Butcher to the Americans. When she first denies it, she is stripped naked and put in a room with her hands tied as water is poured over her. She is then struck with a hammer across her knees and arms, followed by her head the second time. Finally, the third time that Dominica denies it, she is threatened with a gun, but when the trigger is pulled, it turns out that the gun was unloaded. Just then, Ivan enters the room and informs her that there is only so much protection he can provide her. Dominica claims that this was all part of her plan to persuade the Americans of her sincerity. She adds that Nate needed a reason to trust her, and now that she has been tormented, you will have no reason not to. Then, Dominica asks for permission to come back and prove her competence with the task at hand. Following this, Dominica returns to Budapest to reunite with Nate, and they share a warm embrace. She then convinces Nate to move her and her mother to America and offer her more money, which he agrees to despite his suspicions about her early release. Later that night, Dominica wakes up to find that Nate is no longer sleeping next to her. As she walks into the kitchen, she discovers Nate chained to a chair while an SVR agent is torturing him and asking questions about Marble. She initially interrogates Nate about Marble and tortures him as well. But while the agent is preoccupied, she ambushes him and frees Nate. They both suffer severe injuries and are taken to the hospital immediately. The next day, Dominika wakes up in the hospital, and it seems as though her life has come to an end. By saving Nate's life, she exposed her cover to the Russians, and now she has no more cards to play. Later, General Korkinoy approaches her and informs her that he is aware of her involvement with the CIA and that she murdered their agent. She tries to deny the accusations out of fear, but General Korkinoy reveals himself as the Marble. He confesses that he is the source of the information that the Americans are receiving, and Nate fired his gun to defend him the night of the police altercation. Furthermore, General Korkinoy admits that he was once a patriot, but when his wife fell ill, Russian officials forbade an American doctor from operating on her. He claims that the entire government is corrupt, which is why his wife died, and he developed a connection with the Americans. Marble then urges Dominika to reveal this cover so she can take his place as a mole. Once General Korkinoy leaves, she checks on Nate and leaves too. Following this, Dominika turns herself into the police and asks to speak with the Russian ambassador. Upon meeting him, she advises the ambassador to contact Colonel Zadorov and notify him that she knows who the mole is, but in exchange for this information, she wants to be a free woman. Later that evening, they arrange a rendezvous at the airport to finalize the exchange, and Nate accompanies her to verify the mole's identification. While still venting his anger, Nate asserts to Dominika that the Russians will never allow them to capture Marble alive. She then argues that someday he will come to understand what she has done, but Nate remains certain that he won't, as he refuses to discard people. Then, without further ado, Dominika approaches the Russians, while Marble approaches the Americans. All that remains is for Nate to verify the identity of the mole. When the bag is removed, it is revealed that the man that Dominika had identified as the mole is her uncle Ivan, not court-going. In a series of flashbacks, we learn that Dominika has been working hard to get Ivan convicted, including stealing a glass from Nate's apartment and placing it in Ivan's, creating a bank account in Ivan's name, and having the CIA transfer money into the account. Ivan is shot by a Russian sniper and Dominika is flown away in a helicopter. She then receives an honorary award from the Russian government a few days later, and General Korkinoy nods and smiles at her as everyone applauds. Finally, Dominika receives a phone call from an anonymous person who starts playing the Greek piano concerto, which she had told Nate was the first tune she had ever danced to.